Empezar la grabación. We're going to start our recording here. Y buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenas tardes, buenas tardes. Todavía hay luz. There's still some light, so we'll say buenas tardes. Espero que ustedes estén bien. I hope you guys are all well. We have our last session for spring. We're going to have next week off. Next week is an off week. There won't be class. And then we'll start back up first week of June. So today, we've got on what I have on tap for today is I'm going to have a little description of something you've been hearing a lot in Destinos. It's not something you have to be able to actually use speaking a lot, but it's going to talk about futures. So we're going to have that and why they're using it in Destinos, why they used it the last couple of sessions. So a good little short video on that. We'll do our little walkthrough of Destinos, episodio 37. Do a little walkthrough of that episode. And we're going to do our practice of the indirect object prompt. So I'm going to put that up on the share screen so you remember what it looks like. It looks like this. And so you are going to use this for your small groups. So whether you need to bring it up in a separate screen or whether you printed it out or took little notes, whatever, make sure you've got that handy for the small group work that we will do a little bit later on. Okay, vale. And I think we may get to our spot, the robot article. We'll see if we get to that or not. I hope so. Espero que sí. Pero vamos a empezar con el futuro. We're going to start with a little description of future tense. You've been hearing a lot of future tense in the last two episodes, dos episodios. 2 episodes of Destinos. And we're going to show you how that is formed just so that you know how it is done, so you understand it. I will be honest with you, future tense is not something you hear in conversational speech all the time, because for future, most people tend to, in a conversational way, use ir plus a plus an infinitive. So that is probably the more usual thing. But of course, future, we generally in English have to use the word will. So he's going to show you how they're doing that. So again, this is not that I'm going to make you really practice speaking with future tense, because I don't think it's really necessary for you, certainly not at this point, because ir plus a plus an infinitive is much more usual for future, but so that you understand how they're forming it and why it looks the way it does. We'll check out at least part of this, and I may cut it a little bit short, just give you enough of it so that you know what they are doing. Okay.
So we're going to try to figure out the future tense today, and it is not difficult. Here are some examples of the future tense in English. I will go tomorrow. Okay, something we're going to do in the future. She will talk to her boyfriend tonight, right? We will live in Paris, maybe someday, right? So those are examples of the future tense. Now, just a quick note, we can say what we're going to do in the future by using ir plus a plus infinitive, right? We did learn that. So you can still use ir plus a plus infinitive, but this is actually saying what you will do. All right, you don't have to use a formula like that. We're just going to change the verb. All right, so how do we do the future tense? First of all, we're not going to say will. We've already established that. We're going to take the verb and we're going to put a set of endings on it. I want to point something out really quick. You know, all along in our adventure together learning Spanish, we've always, when we learned the present tense and the preterite tense, we've always taken the verb and we take the AR off or the ER off or the IR and we put an ending on it. Well, here's the thing. For the future tense, we're gonna do something we've never done before. we're going to leave that verb exactly like it is. So we're going to leave that AR on it. We're going to leave that IR, and we're going to leave that ER on it. Just going to leave it there. And what we're going to do, instead of taking that off and putting an ending in its place, we're going to leave it there and put an ending after it. Okay? So you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So first of all, leave the AR, ER, and IR. Now let's go ahead and put our chart up, and let's just look at the endings that we're going to use. Now, this chart is going to kind of mix ARs and ER endings together. And we are going to have some accents on this. Go ahead and put it in your mind that all of these have accents except the nosotros form, okay? So let's just go ahead and go through the endings. Up there at the top left for the yo form, we're actually going to use the same ending that we did in preterite. When we learned the past tense in AR, we're going to use E with an accent.
And I'm going to remind you guys of something and stop him for a moment at this point. These endings, future tense uses the exact same ending, whether it's an AR verb, an ER verb, an IR verb. There is no difference in the endings. You know, you're very used to like imperfecto. You've got the ia endings for ER and IR verbs. You've got the aba endings, right? Present tense, you've got o for yo for all of them, but then lots of present tense endings with vowels and lots of present tense endings with vowels, you know. Aprendo, aprendes, aprende, aprendemos, aprenden, hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablan. AR, ER, IR are all going to use the same endings for future tense. You may wonder why they don't use this more. Well, we only use it if we want to say will do something. And even then, most people in conversation will probably use that ir plus a plus an infinitive instead. There's a subtle difference between using that and future tense, but it's really subtle. And most people use ir plus a. But there is one thing that this is used for a lot, which we'll seg to later. So here are the endings. We keep the infinitive on. We don't take off the AR, ER, IR, and here will be the endings.
Okay, and then in the middle, we're going to use as, which A with an accent and an S, okay? Then at the bottom left, we're going to use this, which is the A with an accent, okay? Up at the top right, again, this is the one that doesn't have an ending on it. We're going to use hemos, the present tense ER ending. And then for the vosotros form, we're going to put ace, EIS with an accent on the E. And then for the bottom right, we're going to put an, AN with an accent. So you can see really the endings do borrow from other tenses, so they are similar. Okay, but again, we're just going to put it at the end of the infinitive unchanged verb. All right. Now, I want to use a verb just to show you what this looks like in Spanish. Okay. Let's use the verb viajar, to travel. So the verb viajar it means to travel. So what we're going to be saying is I will travel, you will travel, we will travel, they will travel, etc. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll put viajar in the yo box up there in the top left. Unchanged. AR is still there. Now let's just stick that ending on there, the E with the accent. So now we have viajaré. Viajaré. Okay, now you can probably do the rest on your own, but let's put them up there just in case. So as for the tu form, we're going to put viajar, and we're going to put as on there. So viajarás. Viajarás. Bottom left, we're going to put the A with the accent, viajará. So él, ella, usted viajará. Over for the nosotros form, viajaremos. Viajaremos. And for the vosotros form, viajaréis. Viajaréis. And then at the bottom right, viajarán. Viajarán. Okay, and that's how we do all ERs, AR, and IR verbs in Spanish when we want to do the future tense.
So what's actually hard about future tense is not forming it. It is a mouthful to pronounce because when you think about it, you've got an extra syllable on every single verb because we keep the AR, we keep the ER, we keep the IR. So if you take a word like trabajar, trabajaré, trabajarás, trabajará, it is kind of challenging to get that whole thing out because it winds up being a very long verb. Very easy to form, but a very long verb, and it doesn't get different endings for AR, ER, IR. Okay.
Let's look at this in context for a minute. We'll take our chart off the screen.
And by the way,
And
no
let's look at
stem
it in context.
changes.
So those sentences I
There
did a
will
while
be
ago with
some
you, I will
irregulars.
go tomorrow. We actually take the verb ir and put the ending on it. Yo iré mañana. Yo iré mañana. She will talk to her boyfriend tonight. Hope it's nothing serious, right? Ella hablará con su novio esta noche. Ella hablará con su novio esta noche. And that other sentence we talked about, maybe you're dreaming about this one someday. We will live in Paris. We will live in Paris. Viviremos en París. Viviremos en París. All right, now, I want to give you some other conditions under which we can use the future tense, because not only can we say will do something, there's some other conditions that we can use it for. So one of these could be when we're making predictions about the future, okay?
And now this is actually what you have been hearing for the last 2 episodes in Destinos. Speculations and predictions. Future tense, kind of oddly, I guess, for the English ear, is often used not to necessarily express future, but to speculate, what must he be doing? What can he be doing? Okay, so quite often it is used in that sense. And in Destinos, that's exactly what they were using it for. Okay, que estarán haciendo, what can they be doing? Smooching out there on the back porch, right? On the back patio. That's how they were using future tense. So when you hear it, you will kind of know what they're doing with this.
I will find a nice house one day. I will find a nice house one day. Now, we don't know that to be 100% true, but we hope it's true. But we can use the future tense about even making predictions. Even if it's not set, we will do this. So I will find a nice house one day. Encontraré una bonita casa algún día. Encontraré una bonita casa algún día. Now, we can also use this to speculate about a current situation. So here's an example. John is probably at work now.
And you won't even hear or translate the word probably to say this. To say that somebody is probably going to do something, often the future tense is used. And it is understood that you're speculating, and they don't say the word probably, they use future, and that is what conveys the idea of probably.
Now, that's not the future tense, but we're wondering, and if we go to find, I wonder what we will find. We will find that John is at work now. He's probably at work. So we're speculating about a situation currently. So we can do that. Juan estará en el trabajo ahora. Juan estará en el trabajo ahora. So we can.
And another way we could translate this idea of Juan estará en el trabajo ahora is Juan must be, he must be at work. If the thing you have in mind is to say, oh, he must be doing that, future works for that. Future tense does work. Okay, so I'm not going to go on and on with it because actually in conversational use, it's not that big. Oh, except this example is quite good. I wonder how old she is.
Whatever verb it is, and in this case it would be tener, because that's what we use for age. So I would say, ¿cuántos años tendrá ella?
¿Cuántos años tendrá ella? Tendrá is a future, and you will say, wait a minute, that's not tener. Tener, shouldn't it be tenerá? There are some irregulars of future tense. This is a future for tener. It is not tenerá. But ¿cuántos años tendrá ella? How many years will she have? Really, if somebody phrases it that way, what they really mean is, gee, I don't really know how old she is. I wonder how old. I wonder how many years she will have. Okay, so just know that future can be used for speculation, wondering about things when you're not quite sure. Future tense does have some odd little irregulars. I'm not going to go through all of them now. Caber, well, you're not going to talk about fitting all that much. What generally happens with the irregulars is that you get rid of the vowel here in the AR, ER, or IR, and you kind of trash compact it together. Or other ones like this one, poner, will get rid of the E of the ER, but it will insert a D. Why do they put a D in there? Because there's sure no D in poner, but that's what they do. So this is, and that's what happened with tener.
So P-O-N-D.
Pondré, pondré, pondré. Okay. Pondré, tendré does the same thing. Tener puts in a D and gets rid of the E of the ER. So there are a few that are like that. There are a few that are really weird, like decir. It gets rid of the E, the C, it keeps the I. Dir, diré, dirás, dirán, diremos, dirán. So, you know, there are a few that, and hacer knocks out a bunch of letters as well. So, diré, I will tell or I will say. Haber.
Okay, so the verb haber in the future would be H-A-B-R.
Habrá, habrá. Instead of I, instead of había, instead of hubo. So just, you know, there are some odds. Salir gets a D as well. That's how salir looks. And I'll give you the links that you can look at this later. Hacer eliminates things.
To be able to.
Poder eliminates the E. Podré.
Tener is another one. Yo tendré.
Tendré.
We used a while ago.
So I'll give you the links that you can go through all those irregulars. It's not important that you know or can say all of them. Again, because ir plus a plus infinitive for conversing, chit-chatting with people is far, 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 far more common than using future. But using future is what they used for speculating and say that somebody must be doing something. Okay, even though we don't really know. So I'll give you the rest of that video so you can watch it over later at your leisure, because it's not the kind of thing where we really need to use this speaking with people just to chit chat very often. It's actually not very common. Okay. A ver. A ver. Vamos a ver. I do want to take a look at Destinos, a little walkthrough with Destinos. They packed in a lot of vocabulary on money, talking about bank accounts, bills, paying things. Some of it's a little outdated. Many of us don't use checks anymore. Yeah, but you know, remember this was made back in the 80s when in point of fact, we paid everything with checks, of course. And so they went through a lot of the vocabulary for that, which is helpful to actually know. And please know that, of course, there are some differences between Spanish and English vocabulary too. You know, if you say, bring me the check and you're at a restaurant, we don't use that word cheque. Cheque, you know, if you had the old traveler's checks, remember traveler's checks? I used to travel with traveler's checks when I was really, really young, and that went by the wayside in a hurry once I got to be an adult. But tarjeta de crédito, tarjeta de, de débito, okay? So, you know, people are using that a lot more than cheque. But a cheque, of course, we can write checks out to pay bills, but we don't call the bill at a restaurant, el cheque, we call it la cuenta, right? So there's a little difference sometimes in that vocabulary, how we use that. Let's take a look at our episodio. And they started it with the title, which was Llevando Cuentas, carrying accounts, really keeping the books. Okay, so they started with that. Estaban hablando de Rosario. La familia le preguntó a Arturo, they asked Arturo, le preguntó a Arturo cómo era su mamá. They were asking him what his mom was like. This person who, of course, later married somebody else and had Arturo, but Rosario, who was their father's first wife and just recently, you know, in the months that preceded, just found out that he had been married prior to someone else. Okay. Estaban hablando de Rosario, de su carácter, and she's talking to her brother. We're back at the hospital. Estamos en el hospital. Estamos en el hospital con don Fernando y con Roberto. Ya verás. You will see, ya verás las sorpresas que te esperan. You'll see what surprises are waiting for you. She's talking to, you know, he's out of it, poor guy, el pobre Roberto. And she does use future as future. You will probably see, but, you know, she's speculating a little bit. Primero conoceremos a nuestro abuelo. We will meet our grandfather, el padre de papá, dad's father. So she did use future tense here. We will meet. And with that idea of we will probably meet him. ¿Recuerdas que él creía que su padre había muerto? Remember that he, meaning now she's talking about her dad, Ángel. ¿Recuerdas que él creía? Remember that he thought, he believed that his dad had died. So she's just sort of talking to it in his out of it, calmante induced sueño, sleep.
What is that word? In está or something that was just.
Oh, estar, she has a little.
I-E-S-T-A, yeah.
Pues está vivo, he's alive. He vive aquí en Mexico, he lives here in Mexico. Está vivo, he's alive.
It's an exclamation mark upside down.
It's an exclamation, it's not an I.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That word, I can't find it, you know.
Of course, when somebody speaks, you don't hear the exclamation, except you may hear somebody's voice kind of punch something a little bit more. Dicen que es un rico. They say he's a rich guy. Y que tiene una gran hacienda. He's got a big ranch. Such great things to be telling your brother, right? Hablando de dinero. Y ella revisa su... es posible que tenga solamente $10. Is it possible that I've only got $10? Wow, yay. Ahora recuerdo.
Saqué $300 con mi
I took out $300 with my credit card, so she got an advance.
tarjeta de crédito. ¿Cómo voy a pagar?
But notice she uses plain old ir plus a for future, because she's talking about near future. ¿Cómo voy a pagar? How am I going to pay? ¿Cómo voy a pagar si no tengo dinero en mi cuenta de ahorros? Cuenta de ahorros, any cuenta is an account. An account you may have at a bank with your credit card company, lo que sea, whatever it may be. En mi cuenta de ahorros. Pero ahorros son savings. Ahorrar es el verbo. Ahorrar an AR verb is to save money, not to save somebody's life, not to save the poor little kitten that got left out in the rain. Ahorrar is to save only money. Yeah, money, dinero, nada más. But here we use it as cuenta de ahorros, a savings account, which of course nowadays you get absolutely no return on. So yeah. Mamá y papá tenían razón.
Impráctica.
Soy un poco impráctica. I'm a little impractical. Okay.
Pero tú,
el hijo inteligente, el hijo perfecto,
responsable.
responsable.
Me imagino que tienes todo muy bien organizado, ¿no?
Yeah, I imagine, I guess you've got everything well organized. Asuntos financieros. Asuntos means one's affairs, one's issues. Asuntos financieros. Your financial issues, your financial affairs, not a romantic affair. Asuntos. Asuntos and financieros just describe what kinds of issues they are. Financial issues, which that one's pretty easy to understand. Y cuenta de ahorros, y cheques y tarjetas de crédito, muy fácil, ¿no? Una cuenta, an account. If you're in a restaurant, cuenta is the bill, right? Ángela gasta mucho dinero, no sabe ahorrar dinero. She spends lots of money. She does not know how to save money. Okay. In Spanish, the word spend for money is gastar. Or even when we talk about spending effort, we can use gastar. If you spend time, it's not gastar. If you spend time, it's pasar tiempo. Pasar tiempo is to spend time. But gastar is used for spending money. Ahorrar for saving money. Again, separate verbs for that. ¿Y qué más? Ok, estaban hablando un poquito. Y hablan más de el pobre Arturo. Es su primera visita a México, ¿verdad? Y estaban hablando de sus fiestas, que Arturo debe regresar de Argentina a México otra vez, otro día, otro año, no sabemos exactamente, para celebrar. They talk a little more about their country's holidays. So they use this as a way of talking about two big holidays, but this one is really the biggie. El Día de Independencia. El Día de Independencia en México es la feria, el día feriado más común en México. This would be the most common national holiday that really gets celebrated all over Mexico. It is a big deal, like 4th of July would be a big deal for us. Día de Independencia, el 16 de septiembre. So that is their Independence Day. Se dio el grito de independencia, and they always use this word grito, which means a shout, because this gentleman here, Padre Hidalgo, who was an actual Roman Catholic priest, did literally the big shout out. They called it el grito, got up and yelled out to the people, rang the church bells, and called them to action to throw off the Spaniards. They wanted to expel the Spaniards from ruling in Mexico. So, we're looking here, 1820, I want to say, it might be 1821, I'm not sure on the exact year, early 1800s. And Dolores was the name of the little town where he did this grito, this yell. He called the people to bring their arms and rise up against the
Padre Miguel
Spaniards.
Hidalgo supo que los españoles habían descubierto los planes de independencia del grupo de
He found out that the rebels' plans were discovered by the Spaniards. So that is why he had gone up to do the big shout out, el grito, to call people to.
El padre Miguel Hidalgo era uno de estos patriotas. Entonces, en la madrugada de ese día,
En la madrugada,
el
so
padre
that
tocó
means
las campanas
wee
de la
hours in the
iglesia,
morning.
llamando a todos los habitantes del pueblo. Cuando llegaron, Hidalgo les habló otra vez de la igualdad entre los hombres. Les habló de cómo los indígenas, mestizos y criollos deberían tener los mismos derechos que los españoles.
So
de la
he
igualdad
called
entre-
all people to rise up against Spaniards and throw off the yoke of Spanish domination of Mexico. This is actually a big deal that a parish priest was telling them, no matter what your caste is, come and throw out the Spaniards. She mentions 3 classes of people, and I don't think in the United States this is taught very much. But Mexico had a very strict caste system under Spain governing Mexico as a colony. It was an extremely stratified society. Whether you like or dislike the idea of teaching that there are racial differences and critical race theory and all that, they've got their own set of issues with critical race theory. And actually, it's darn important to know about Mexican society. As a colony, she names indígenas, mestizos, criollos. Those were your 3, and there were some, I believe, some subgroups actually within those castes, and they were castes. You were born into one of those 3 castes when Spain governed Mexico as a colony. Indígenas would have been indigenous people of, they would have called them in those days indios. In those days, they were not using the word indígena all the time. Indígena, of course, means indigenous, the people who were there before the Spaniards came over, which is the more accurate term. They were sometimes called indios. And by the way, do not use the word indio if you go down to Mexico. Like critical race theory or not, that word indio has come to be a very offensive term. Number 1, indios really means people who live in India, the subcontinent in Asia. So number 1, it is a misnomer from the get-go, okay? But it was used as a very pejorative term for many, many years. As a matter of fact, the word indio was even used for Spaniards who emigrated to Mexico, made a fortune, and went back to Spain. They would call them indios too, and that was looked at, it was a slur, it was a put down, okay? So they have now supplanted it with the term indígenas, which is much more accurate and considered not at all offensive. Mestizos, now here's your big group in Mexico, and mestizos means mixed, literally. So the indígenas were at the bottom of the caste. If you were of pure indigenous blood, you had very few privileges, very few rights, very poor prospects for earning a good living under colonial rule. The caste above you was the mestizos. But they, and that was actually the biggest proportion of the population. Mestizos means mixed blood. You've got Spanish heritage and indigenous heritage from people having intermarried over the years and had children. And that is the vast majority of the Mexican population, if you look at percentage, of racial groups. But, they were only a little above that indio group. And then criollos. And criollos, you may say, that sounds like Creole. Yes, it is. Creole was, they were more at the top of society caste-wise. Criollos, the Creoles, were people who were really descended from Spanish immigrants who had come over. So that was a much smaller percentage of people. They did not mix blood with indigenous peoples. You know, it was, did you want to intermarry with someone below your station in this caste system? Ideally, you probably did not, but did people do that? Well, sure they did, because people are people and it happens. But criollos were, you know, sitting pretty in that caste system. They had many more rights and privileges. They were the people who wound up governing. There were initially a group of people who came directly over from Spain. You know, criollos were born in Mexico, but born of parents who had come from the motherland of Spain beforehand. And initially, you know, 1600s, you did still have some people who directly came over from Spain, and they would have been even atop the criollos in the caste system. But of course, poco a poco, little by little, there were fewer and fewer people, you know, people descended from Spaniards, sure, but not that many who came directly over from Spain as the years cranked on. So when they talk about those three groups, that was crucial in the development of their country, that there were a lot of indigenous people who fought for many, many, many years to gain rights that the privileged upper classes had for literally hundreds of years. So when they talk about that, that is an important thing to know about Mexican history. The whole thing where they describe Cinco de Mayo is frankly a little convoluted. Cinco de Mayo is a big deal in Puebla. Puebla is a town on the east, or towards the eastern side of Mexico, in el este. Puebla is where the battle happened in 1860, is it 1861 or 1862, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it was actually a very odd situation where the French had sent over troops and installed a Habsburg prince who kind of didn't have enough to do over in Europe. And yeah, because actually Napoleon III of France wanted to be governing Spain. And, you know, United States was too occupied with the Civil War. So they figured, this is our chance. If we're going to do it anytime, now's the time to do it, because they're preoccupied up north there. And none of this Monroe Doctrine business will just sort of slip in the back door. And so they installed a candidate of their own. Napoleon III installed a candidate of his own. And he governed for a while, but it went badly. The person who was actually supposed to be governing was this gentleman, Benito Juarez. You will see lots and lots of streets and towns and all kinds of things named after Benito Juarez. And Benito Juarez was the president at the time when the French came in and tried to take over, and did take over for a while. He led the Mexicans trying to retake their own country from the French. Benito Juarez was a big deal, not only because of that, he was the first full-blooded indigenous person to govern as a president. So he is a point of pride, not only in expelling foreigners trying to take over the governance of Mexico. He is a big deal because he is the first indigenous president of the country. He came literally from nothing. Gained a good education, became a lawyer, became influential in politics. So he is very much revered in Mexican society. Okay, here is the poor gentleman and his wife who wound up being emperors of Mexico during the French thing. Yeah, Maximiliano de Austria. From Austria. Why? Well, it's complex. I'm not going to go into why. But this poor gentleman kind of didn't have enough to do in Europe. So they sent him over to govern with his lovely wife, Carlota. Carlota had a very hard time of it. Carlota was not the most stable person. She kind of lost her marbles partway through the process. Well, you know, but her husband was shot. You know, when hubby's lined up against the wall and shot, this is not a good end. Carlota ended out her years not being very mentally stable. But the reason that Cinco de Mayo is celebrated is that it marks not a defeat of France, but a turning point. The turning point, the very first time when the Mexicans were able to defeat a premier world power army battalion and turn the tide of war to begin to kick out the French. So it's not a yay, we got rid of the French. It's a yay, hey, maybe we can actually kick out the French because we defeated them in an important battle. It is really, Cinco de Mayo only celebrated heavy duty in Puebla, in that area. It's not celebrated like Independence Day is. It's something we celebrate a lot here in the States because it's a really good excuse to drink, yes? But of course, as we have many people who have come from Mexico to settle in the United States, it is something to celebrate. And then they get a little bit heavy into some of the other revolutions, which become rather complicated. Mexico had a series of strongman generals, Porfirio Diaz being one of them, Santa Anna being one very far back, then Porfirio Diaz. And, there were, before, at the turn of the century in the 1900s, the early 1900s, the big revolution where people really wanted land distributed evenly or more equitably amongst other folk lower down on the economic scale. So it's complicated history, but just know that really Dia de Independencia, that September date, is the big one. Y tenemos Carlos, el pobre Carlos, que se despierta. ¿Tuviste una pesadilla? Did you have a nightmare? Dad asks Carlos. Sí, quédate con nosotros. Stay with us. Bueno, pues quédate con nosotros. Stay with us. And we'll see how you do.
Ya se siente mucho mejor. ¿Verdad?
Sí. Pero qué rápido se ha recuperado Carlitos.
How fast you got
Estuvo
over that
enfermito,
illness.
con gripe.
Pero ahora se lo ve muy bien.
Tú eres el esposo de Raquel, ¿verdad?
No, Carlitos,
Oh, you're her husband, right? And so there's a little
yo soy
bit of
soltera.
Entonces son
embarrassment.
novios.
Hijito, ¿por qué preguntas esas cosas?
Porque solo los novios o los esposos se besan en el jardín, ¿no es cierto?
Yeah, only boyfriends or spouses kiss in the patio. So, yeah.
Pero María,
Y ahora estamos con...
¿y si Raquel se enoja?
Y si Raquel se enoja. Raquel's dad has a much firmer grip on reality than mom. We notice. Yeah. Dad's got a little more common sense. No se mete. He does not stick his nose in everything. And what if Raquel gets mad? Gets mad is se enoja. Se enoja means gets mad. El papá sabe cómo son las cosas. He knows what things are
Es
like.
mejor preguntarle si desea ver a Luis.
Wouldn't it be better to ask if she wants to see Luis? Yeah.
Hace
Sí.
años que ya no son novios.
They have not been boyfriend-girlfriend for a really long time. Years. Hace años. Years.
Ay, mira, tú vete a ver tu televisión.
Oh. Tú ve a ver tu televisión. Mamá tells him exactly what she wants him to do. Ve a ver tu televisión. Go watch your TV. Como hace siempre, like you always do.
Como hace siempre. Y déjame a mí estos asuntos. Yo
And leave me to my things. Déjame mis asuntos. Leave me to my my issues, the stuff I've got to do, mis asuntos.
Yo conozco a mi hija.
I know my daughter.
También conozco a mi hija.
I
Pero
also
yo
know my
creo
daughter.
que-
El pobre papá tiene razón.
Oh. Ay, Luis, ¿cómo estás?
Ah, el novio, el exnovio.
Quería decirles que ya he comprado mi pasaje para México.
Oh, I bought my ticket. Pasaje es ticket, no es paisaje. If you hear paisaje, it means landscape. You know, looking out over the land, how the land lays before you, landscape, paisaje. But when we take off the E sound, we have pasaje, and that means passage. So he's talking about a ticket. Ya he comprado, I have bought. I've already bought my ticket.
Justamente estábamos hablando de eso.
Oh, we were just talking about that.
¿Cuándo sales?
When you leave.
Mañana. Tengo solo unos días de vacaciones más.
Oh, he's only got a couple more days of vacation left. Quiero aprovecharlos. I want to take advantage of them, meaning the vacation days.
Y quiero aprovecharlos.
Raquel se pondrá muy contenta.
Ah, they use a future as speculation. Raquel se pondrá muy contenta. She will probably be very happy to see you. Se pondrá, instead of se pone, she is happy. Se pondrá, she'll probably be very happy to see you. That's why she uses
De
future.
verte.
¿Sabe ella que voy para allá?
Oh, does she know that I'm going?
No. Será una completa sorpresa.
Oh, and now she does mean future as real future. It will be a complete surprise. It will be a total surprise. I bet.
Tengo tantas ganas de verla.
I really want to see her. Tener ganas means I feel like doing something. And tantas ganas, I really want to see her, says the exnovio. Dice
Yo
el
creo que a ella
exnovio.
también le gustará verte aquí.
Oh, I think she'll probably like seeing you too.
Entonces, nos veremos en México.
We'll
Sí,
see each
sí.
other.
Está bien. Nos vemos. Buen viaje.
Gracias, también para ustedes. Hasta luego.
Marilyn, did you notice what he was watching on TV?
No.
Remember that old Mystery Science Theater where
¿Es eso? Is it
yeah,
that?
you got all those goofy little robot guys making stupid comments about the their
Así es. It is
Yes.
Mystery Science Theater. Ay, Dios mío.
See, I'm
Okay.
wondering what that says about Luis.
Oh, what does that say about Luis? Yeah,
You're
fun.
right, Karen.
I know.
Yeah, the show that started being kind of a hit with adolescents, yeah, adolescentes. Okay. Pobre Luis.
Anda, viejo.
Anda viejo. Move it, old man. Anda viejo. Viejo is actually, it sounds worse if you say this, move it, old man. Viejo is often used as not, I know it does mean old man, but anda viejo. Mi viejo would be an affectionate way of referring to one's spouse. It sounds a little harsh in English, yeah. My old man, yeah. My old man. They used to use my old man to talk about one's father, yeah. But viejo, mi viejo would be my hubby, and mi vieja would be my wife. So that's used on both sides, viejo, vieja, to refer to one's spouse. But anda, she's saying, move along. Get moving, man. Back to that TV.
Vete a sentar allí.
Go sit down. Vete a sentar.
Tengo que terminar de pagar estas cuentas.
Oh, I've got to finish doing what?
The bills.
I've got to finish paying these bills. Mom kind of wears the pants in the family, yeah? Which is a good thing for her to know what.
Última cuenta.
The last
Híjole,
bill.
está tan caro.
Híjole. Yeah, this is one of those famous Mexican expressions. Híjole doesn't really have a good translation. Hijo means son, but it doesn't really at all mean son. Híjole, it's just like, oh my gosh. Todo está tan caro. Everything's so expensive.
Caramba, pagué 5
And caramba, yeah, another exclamation. Pagué, I paid 5 bills.
cuentas. Y ya no me queda nada en la cuenta corriente.
And there's nothing left in my checking account. Cuenta corriente. Corriente means current. Cuenta corriente is your checking account. And even if you don't write checks, you know, that would still be what most of us would use to pay off with a debit, right? La cuenta corriente. So your checking account is la cuenta corriente.
Tengo que transferir dinero de la cuenta de ahorros a la cuenta corriente.
So I have to transfer money. Transferir, transferir, buen cognado, good cognate. Transferir is used for transferring money de la cuenta de ahorros a la cuenta corriente, transferring from your savings to your checking.
Como muchas personas mayores de la clase trabajadora, María Rodríguez se preocupa por el dinero.
She worries about money.
Como todo el mundo, los mayores tienen sus gastos.
Like everybody, older folks have expenses. Gastos, gastar is to spend money, but when we use it in plural as a noun, which is the word gastos, it means your expenses, that which you spend. So anything you have to pay for water, electricity, your regular expenses, right?
La casa, el teléfono,
Los gastos. We're just showing examples of what we would put in gastos.
Pero a diferencia de los jóvenes, sus ingresos son fijos.
Sus ingresos son fijos. Ingresos means income. Ingresos is the money coming in. So income is ingresos. Gastos, expenses, things you pay for. Ingresos, income. Son fijos, fixed. Sometimes, not always, where we would have an X, you see a J in Spanish. Fijos means fixed income.
Los ingresos son el dinero que entra en una casa.
Money coming into the
Que
house.
gana una familia.
What you earn, ingresos.
Los gastos son el dinero que sale.
The money that goes out, sale. Salir is to go out. Los gastos son el dinero que sale.
Hay gastos
para mantener la casa.
La salud y comprar la comida. En fin, hay muchos gastos en la vida diaria. Los ingresos de los mayores son fijos porque ya no trabajan. Dependen de la seguridad social o de otro sistema. Pero las cuentas y los precios no son fijos a causa de la inflación. Y mientras los ingresos de otras personas suben, los ingresos de los jubilados no cambian.
The income of retired people does not change. Y aquí hablando un poquito más. Y otra cosita, another thing, they use another little thing. She's got her receipts. Los recibos. Recibos means receipts. So any piece of paper you keep track of that shows what you have spent. And of course, any lawyer who was indulging in this, she would have her travel expenses, the gas, her car rental, her tickets, any fees she paid to get documents. If she got copies of these birth certificates from the government, she probably would have paid a fee. So all these things you pull together to los recibos, receipts. So she submits these to get her payment.
Tuve que cargar mucho a mi tarjeta de crédito.
I had to charge a lot. Tuve que cargar. Cargar. Cargar has two R's. Never forget that. Cargar is to charge. Oh, we use it for charging your electronic devices. Cargar. We use it for cargar, charging money as well. But make sure it's cargar. If you omit the first R, it's like a naughty word. So don't omit the first R. Cargar. Cagar is to take a poop, and it's used to cuss. British people have a tough time. The Brits, not usually the Americans, but Brits have often a hard time with the verb cargar because they soften R's. And you do not want it to sound like cagar. It must be cargar.
Para no gastar todo mi efectivo.
Muy bien. Mañana le daré tus recibos a mi secretaria y le diré que te haga un cheque.
And he used all future here. Tomorrow I will give all these receipts in, and I will tell her to write out a check to you. Le diré que te haga un cheque. I will tell her, he's talking about the secretary, that's who the les are talking about, la secretaria. Le diré, I will tell her, que te haga un cheque, that she make out a check to you. So he's giving an order. I'll tell her to pay you. She hasn't paid yet, so it goes into subjunctive.
Eso sería muy conveniente. Tengo que hacer cuentas en mi oficina de Los Ángeles. Si puedo regresar con un cheque, tanto mejor. Tenemos una secretaria que siempre grita. Hay muchos gastos y pocos ingresos. ¿Cómo me van a pagar a mí?
Tu secretaria no tiene de qué preocuparse, ni tú tampoco. Mañana tendrás tu cheque también.
Tomorrow you will have your check.
Quiero que me des cuanto antes los documentos que tienes de Rosario y Ángel. Tendremos que mostrárselos a Fernando.
Now he wants to see the birth document for the son. He wants to show, a birth certificate as proof to Fernando that Roberto and Angela, that all these people are descendants of the son that he had, but only recently found out that he had this other son. So he wants these documentos. He wants them to prove
En el hotel tengo
their
fotos de
identity.
Ángel, un certificado de nacimiento, y mañana estarán reveladas las fotos que tomé durante mi viaje.
¿Fotos de qué?
De la tumba de Rosario, también de la de Ángel. Tengo fotos de las casas donde vivieron.
Muy bien. Esos papeles son muy importantes para Fernando. Y para nosotros también. Bueno, tendremos que regresar a la sala.
So we'll have to go back to the living room. So they say their goodbyes, and there's not a whole lot else going on except for a little gift, un regalito. Arturo le da la foto. He gives her the photograph he had taken of the two of them. And I want you to notice how they use these funny subjunctives. They wanted Arturo to talk about Rosario. This hablara is just a past subjunctive. When you want somebody to do something, it becomes subjunctive. They used a past subjunctive. It's not important that you know how to use that in speaking yet, but to recognize it. Why did they want him to come back to Mexico? They wanted Arturo to return to Mexico. So just like as you have want somebody to do something, wanted somebody to do something, uses past tense and a past subjunctive. Don't worry yourselves with having to form that yet. That's kind of an advanced things to learn how to use. Y eso es, and they talk a little bit about the vergüenza, that they were embarrassed to be caught kissing. Y Pedro quería que yo le diera. Pedro wanted that I should give to him documentos. Okay. Pedro wanted me, different person, to give something. It goes from past tense to a past subjunctive. So that's why you have that funny looking thing of diera. Diera is actually from dar. It doesn't look very much like dar, does it? But it means Pedro wanted that I should give him the documents. Okay, so that you know what those were talking about. Okay. Y eso es todo, la foto y el fin. And that is the end of that. Okay. ¿Tienen más preguntas? Do you have any other questions about the destinos? ¿Sí o no? Mainly not a lot of financial stuff in that. And they use some of that kind of funky looking subjunctive. I do want to send you out into some groups to work on these little pronouns a little more. So I'm going to preview what this page looks like again. And we're going to do some translation first. We'll actually do, I think, maybe the first 3 of these, just to kind of get our feet wet. I'm going to make this a bigger screen so you can see it. You're going to need to plug in a le or a les in with these. So we're going to do the first 3 together. But I have given you the verb I want you to use. I want you to use dar, hacer una pregunta, and contar una historia. Okay, so we'll do these 3 together first, and then we'll send you off into some smaller groups. I'm giving you guys the key. ¿Cómo se dice? Let's figure out how are we going to use the verb dar to say I'm giving.
Doy.
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 Doy, okay, but these other words are going to have to nest around doy, right? I'm giving you guys, and you guys is going to have to actually come first. So the you guys will be
Les.
les. So I want you to think of this les doy as a unit to use together. Les doy. You I give. Les doy. Les doy las llaves. Les doy las llaves. Bien.
A
singular.
La llave.
Oh, la llave, perdón.
And
Key.
la.
Singular. Gracias. Les doy la llave. You can use en a ustedes. You can, if it isn't clear, but you don't have to. Susana, sí.
Yeah, could you say les estoy dando?
You can, but it has to be happening right now.
Oh, okay. Forgot about that.
So do remember, yeah, doy is I give, I do give, I am giving. Because in English, we're, you might say, oh, I'm giving him a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when is that happening? Maybe tomorrow? Maybe next week? Yeah. But in Spanish, you can just use the present tense for that. So, and you're really only, you can say estoy dando, le estoy dando, you can, but then it better be happening while you're talking to make that really, in context to make sense. Okay, I'm asking that question. ¿Cómo se dice?
Le hago una pregunta.
Le hago una pregunta. Le hago una pregunta. Le hago una pregunta. Le hago una pregunta. Think of le hago, le hago, le hago. Les doy, le hago, le hago. Okay? Think of that pronoun always being joined with that verb. Okay? I'm telling them a story.
Les cuento.
Les cuento. Perfecto.
Una historia.
Una historia. Les cuento una historia. Les cuento una historia. Bien. I want you to think of that pronoun, and the pronoun isn't telling who's doing it, it's telling who's receiving it. Bien. I'm going to send you off to do the next 5. and do that in small groups. We'll come back and see if you had any difficulty with it. ¿Hay alguna pregunta? Is there any question before I send you off? Sí o no?
Oh, number 8, is that
Sí,
a
sí.
command?
It
Did you
is
say
a
it did?
command. That
Okay.
is going to have to be a command. Exacto.
Number 8 is a command.
Número 8, right. Ask, it doesn't say who's asking. Oh, that means you're telling somebody go do it. Ask the receptionist. So something a little funny will happen with that particular one.
Is number 6 a negative or is that a trick?
It's, I'm telling you means it's happening, but I'm telling you,
No.
no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And that's just the word no. Yeah. Okay, bien. Okay, hit your join button. Cinco minutos, about 5 minutes, maybe a little more, quizás un poquito más. Are you off? Muy bien, aquí vienen todos. Here comes everybody. Okay.
Número 8, profesora, por favor.
Número 8. Es un poquito distinto. That one's a little bit different. Sí. Okay. I'm bringing the dishes to you all. I want you to think pronoun and the verb. Pronoun and the verb.
Yo les traigo los platos.
Les traigo los platos. Les traigo los platos. Muy fácil. Les traigo los platos. Les traigo. I'll buy them a gift. Pronoun and verb.
A
Pronoun
question
and verb.
on the
sí.
first one.
Sí, dime.
So I was checking on Google Translate, which I know I'm not supposed to do, but it said, for there, it said, los traigo los platos a todos.
Oh, a todos, you could add an a todos at the end of that. A todos just means everybody. Sure.
To all, because of the word all, yeah.
All of you, yeah. That just makes it a little more specific. You can absolutely do that. So now, Catalina, what I want to point out to you, and I'm going to do this on the screen, we would never do what I just did here. You would never shorten it to
Can't see your
traigo
screen.
los, perdón, gracias, thank you. Aquí vamos, here we go. Okay. You would never do, okay, I'm gonna put my les back here. That les is pretty sacred. You'll always hear the les there. You might think, well, can't I get rid of that? Because it's hard for me to remember how to use it. Can't I just say, traigo los platos a todos, because that sounds more like English, way easier for you to remember, right? But we would never get rid of that les. You would never say it as traigo los platos a todos. It would always be les traigo, les traigo, les traigo. It would always be that. I mean, that's just the way people are going to say it. So you can add on the a todos to the end. Muy bien. But that won't mean we're getting rid of that word les. ¿Entiendes? No? Okay. So we can add on little fluffy extras onto the end to be more specific, and that's a-okay. But that doesn't mean we can omit that word les. Okay, I'm buying them a gift. We want them, I buy. Them, I buy. Them, I buy.
I have les voy a comprar un regalo.
Okay.
But it sounds like
Les voy a
future to me.
It can be les compro un regalo. It could be les voy a comprar, or voy a comprarles, sí, un regalo, sí.
Well, Marilyn, I'm sorry, doesn't that mean I will buy them a gift?
It
you
means
use
I'm
future?
going, it means I'm going to,
Yep.
yes. I'll buy them a
That's-
gift. You might take that as a future. You could express it that way. You could express it that way. You could use that because voy a comprar gets the idea of I will do this. So you could. I will do this is the same thing as I'm going to do this. So you can express it any of those ways. But if I use it as les voy a comprar, it can switch off where that word les goes, right? Because it's two verbs working together. It could be les voy a comprar or voy a comprarles. And either position for the word les is okay if you choose to use two verbs. But if you use only one verb, there's only one thing you can do, and that's les compro. Les compro, les compro. Y nada más, and nothing else. So verb by itself, it's got to be les compro. Bien? Okay, I'm telling you no.
Te estoy diciendo que no.
You can.
Te digo? Te digo no.
Te digo will be more common. Te digo que no. Te digo que no. It can even be le digo que no. It can be either one. You know, it could be the formal, I'm telling you, le digo. It can be the informal, I'm telling you, te digo que no. Te digo, le digo, te digo, le digo. You can say it Estoy diciendo, but then it's got to be happening right now. Which
Well,
it
at
might
least that
be.
way, to me, it looked like a pretty emphatic. Right now, I'm saying no. You know, I'm telling you no.
Te estoy diciendo que no. Or again, because I'm using two verbs together, and I don't have my accent mark on, but it will be there, so it's going to look funny. Estoy diciéndote que no. So I'm sorry, I've got that. I did not switch on my keyboard, so I don't have my accent keyboard, but the accent would be over the E. Bien. Yes, you could do that.
Una
Sí, sí.
pregunta.
Sí, sí.
The K has to be there.
It does have to be there.
Does dar often use K? Or is dar often followed by K? I should say.
Dar, or you mean decir?
I'm sorry. What we were just talking. Wait a minute.
I'm telling you,
I'm sorry.
I'm telling you, no always comes out as que no. And there's no reason for me to give you, except that that's the way it's said. But if I'm telling you yes would be que sí. Que sí.
Okay.
I'm telling you no, te digo que no, te digo que sí. It's like saying, claro que no, claro que sí, que no. Yeah, it's always paired up that way. It's just the way they use that phrase.
Okay.
Okay. I'm charging you $20.
Te cobro.
Te cobro.
$20.
Te cobro $20. $20. Te cobro, le cobro, right? If you're working with a guy who's driving a taxi or something, he may address you as the formal you, and then it'll be le cobro, okay, le cobro, te cobro, okay, a ver, muy bien, aquí. El problema, tenemos este problema con número 8. Número 8 sí es un mandato, es un mandato. Es un mandato. So how do we make this go do it? Command, just the verb.
Preguntas.
Well, no, not preguntes.
No?
No. Familiar command will be pregunta. We take away the S.
That's true.
Pregunta. If it's a formal command, it'll be pregunte. If it's to more than one person, it'll be pregunten. Okay, bien. And now I'm going to have to get my keyboard in because I cannot stand it if I don't have my accent mark for this. It will just feel too bizarre. Okay, so yes, do it command, you must attach the pronoun. Ask the receptionist.
Oh, okay.
You
So
have to have ask him.
Pregúntale.
Pregúntale.
Could you say le pregunte?
No, not for a command. A command, you have to flip that. If it's an affirmative command, pregúntale, pregúntele. Pregúntale, pregúntele. Ask him. Pregúntele al recepcionista. And you'll need to have that little le. Even though it doesn't say ask him, the receptionist, that word him's got to be in there. It's got to be in there. They will never, never omit that word le. In real life, that's always the way it will be expressed. Pregúntale, ask him. Pregúntele, ask him, formal command. Al recepcionista, cuando se abre el restaurante.
You need say in there?
Generally will. Okay, here's one of those situations. If you just say, cuando abre el restaurante, they'll totally get what you mean. but it would probably more commonly be said as cuando se abre, when the restaurant is opening. It's like a passive voice thing. The restaurant is opening up. Yeah. So it'll probably be expressed as se abre, because that is an it is an impersonal way of talking about what is going to happen with the restaurant. Somebody else is opening up the restaurant. We don't really know. We're not putting an emphasis on who's opening up the restaurant. It's just, it will open. Okay.
You want that verb before the restaurant.
But yeah, generally it will switch to in front. But would they understand you saying cuando abre el restaurante? Yes, they would totally understand you. But because you're talking about the restaurant in kind of impersonal terms, when it is being opened by somebody, we don't know who, because we don't really care who's opening it, it'll be expressed as cuando se abre, most frequently. Okay, bien? See? And if you miss the se, don't let that worry you, because they'll still get it if you say cuando abre el restaurante.
Well, I'm sorry, one more question.
Sí.
I don't understand why you're using an indirect object, because
Here?
I thought indirect object was to whom or for whom.
You're right.
I said, oh, there you're not asking to whom or for whom anything.
And there's no word him there. Ask him. It didn't say ask him.
Or but see, to me, I would say ask to him or for him.
That's the way, but that's how you'll hear them say it.
Okay.
That's to show you how frequent, how commonly this is used.
Okay.
It's even though it isn't really like in a translation, the to him doesn't appear at all. You're asking him something, and that word will always wind up being there. It'll always be stated that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
No, that's a perfectly logical question. That's why it's the last one. Put that in the middle and everybody's like, what? Yeah, that's why that's in the last one. Ask him, ask her, ask somebody is always pregúntale or pregúntele, depending on if it's a formal or an informal question, or a command rather. Bien? Okay. Más preguntas, more questions on those. I want you to think of the pronoun and verb and think of them as two things that go together. So I want you to think of these as les doy, le hago, les cuento, les traigo. Who you're doing it for always comes up. Les compro, te digo or le digo if it's formal, te cobro or le cobro if it's formal. And I want you to think of these together because they'll always be together like this. Pregúntale, pregúntele. Okay, bien. This is just always the way these pronouns always get linked up with a verb. In common speech, it's just always the way they're going to express that idea. Yay, it'll let me put in my accent marks there. Okay, bien. And you'll see plenty more of that. So this will not be the only time you'll see it. Okay. A ver, should we save these for summer session? See?
See?
Unless you want to go like way over.
No, see, summer.
Okay. En dos semanas, in 2 weeks.
They will require some discussion.
Now, so what I am going to give you is that we have a handy dandy. I want you to think of these verbs. I'll send you a link for this. Ooh, is this going to make it bigger? No. Eso sí. think of all these forms of decir, and really you don't need the last two. The first three columns, digo and dije and decía, those are the three forms of decir you're always going to hear. Either I'm doing it now, I did it and it's over with, or I used to say something. Presente and pretérito and imperfecto are the three most common tenses. You'll hear them used with decir. And decir, I want you to always think of a pronoun linked to decir. Te digo, le digo, les digo, or te dije, le dije, les dije, or te decía, le decía, les decía. You're always going to hear, almost always, a pronoun linked with this verb decir. This verb decir and dar are probably the number one and number two. You'll always hear a me, te, nos, le, or les plugged in before that verb. Because you always say something to somebody or give something to somebody. So knowing which verbs take these funny little le and les pronouns is a big deal, okay? So I'm gonna give you that particular site so you can see what the forms of decir are, because you may not know all those different tenses, but just look at the three top tenses, the three first ones, okay? They're present and preterite and imperfect. So present and past, two kinds of past tenses. So when you look at those and you look at these questions, they're going to ask things like, what did you tell him? What did you tell him? ¿Qué le dijiste? What did you tell him? Le dijiste. Le dijiste. And the question has le dijiste, what did you tell him? It's a past, that's why I've shown you the table. You'll use dije in the answer. ¿A quién le haces una pregunta? Who do you ask a question when you travel? What kind of people do you typically ask a question when you're traveling? What kind of places are you in? You're in hotels, you're in airports, right? You're in restaurants. ¿Qué le compras? What do you buy for that person? ¿Qué le compras? What do you buy for him? ¿A quién le das? Who do you give out your phone number to? ¿A quién le das? ¿A quiénes les preparas? Who do you fix a special dinner for? I'm going to underline those. So when you go back in and look at them, they'll be underlined. I want you to link those pronouns with the verbs. Okay? These will be typical verbs that you hear a pronoun with all the time. ¿Está bien?
Sí.
Okay. We're going to save our spot the robot and these questions for when we get back. ¿Hay alguna pregunta antes de terminar o antes de acabar con la lección? Any questions you've got before we start up or finish off with lessons? Sí o no?
No.
Okay. Just try to get used to which verbs use these a lot. I'm always trying to mix these with verbs that are really typical for a me, te, nos, le, or les. Bien. I'm not going to give you a destinos for the, or unless you want one. Do you want a destinos in between?
Oh, yeah.
Sí or no?
I
Week
like
off?
it.
Week off?
Oh,
We're going
I
to be in Santa Fe, so.
So that would be 38, right?
Yeah.
You wanna-
Week to rest? Week to rest? Or
Week to rest is good.
Oh,
week
I'll
to
go
rest?
with-
You still got the little spot the dog article to work on something. But let's take a little week to rest, a little bit of downtime. And we'll come back to this pesky thing of le or les and pairing it up with verbs. Okay? ¿Está bien?
¿Está bien?
Excelente. Entonces, espero que tengan una buena semana. I hope you all have a really good week.